Hi, how you doing, folks? Kurt Mulway with the atco Acorn. I'm here with former Mayor Tony Clark. He's now with the Historic Society of Waterford Township. This is part three. We talked about his project with the Historic Society about getting a train station replica, which is actually going to be about twice as big as the original train station in Acco, but it's going to look the same. It's just going to be twice the size because they have about 500 historic artifacts that they want to put in it. If you want to donate, they're a 501c and you can mail donation to their post office box in Acco. I'll put the address down on the bottom in the comment section. And so now we're at part three of the history of Waterford Township, and now we're getting into Acco a little bit more. So, do you want to? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay, so
Happy to be here again.
yeah, good. So you want to pick up where we left off? Now we're down to Acco.
Well, first, I want to start with 1827. That's when a man by the name of Thomas Richards purchased 4,600 acres and established the Jackson Glassworks in the area known as Jackson Village, which now we know as Loudon. There are many sections of our, like where we're sitting right now at one time was called Roseville.
Okay.
To give you an idea. So we had a number of little areas all around this township, which finally merged together, part to be Atco, part to be Waterford, Dunbarton. So,
Dunbarton, yeah.
So yeah, it's just had quite a history. Now, Thomas Richards made, in his glassworks, actually made like window glass. But one of his greatest achievements was the 15,000 glass panels that was used to build the famous Crystal Palace, which was at the 1853 New York World's Fair.
Oh, wow.
It was the first World's Fair in our nation, and he built that beautiful glass building.
And that was made, so the glass
all
was
that
made
glass
here.
was made here. And then one little secret, of course, when you're making that much glass and's got to ship to New York, you're going to have to put it on a train.
Right.
So they had to build tracks from where the railroad was passing us, per se, to his glassworks.
Okay.
And they built a spur line to there and to get it. In the early days, the railroad was all the way over what they call Winslow Junction. So they had to end up building the rail lines that would go past us and, in fact, eventually go into the seashore. And the Richards family was very big in helping to get the railroad coming this way. And in fact, on Atco Avenue, if you go over and you see what was the Thomas Richards mansion, he built it, the home was built there because that was the high point and they could watch the construction of the railway. And then, of course, watch the railroad. So that was the significance of where that house sat at that time. The house is there. It's now privately owned, but I'm saying that's a very important part of our history. And normally when I go out to talk to groups, I bring slides and photos just to show them, like the Crystal Palace and some of these other things.
I remember you telling me something about the style of that house and the reason it was that style.
Well, his main thing was just, as I said, to observe the rail system. That's what he was doing. The construction and so forth.
Right.
But now that was the next Thomas Richards, and I have to say this: part of the fun of doing the research is, in many cases, when someone passed away, another person was named as an honor.
Oh, okay.
So as you start looking back, say at Thomas Richards, you almost have to say the first Thomas Richards. I used to say the father and the son, so I could because it gets somewhat confusing.
Right.
And I say that because
you're talking about the big White House.
The big White House.
The big White House.
Yeah, right beside the Presbyterian Church.
Okay, yeah, and I remember you saying the reason, because it looks like a southern house, and the reason was because one of them, their wife was from the south or something, and he wanted her to feel.
I didn't say that. That was someone else who spoke on that.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, so, all right,
because that's all right. if you go back, they were Bartrams on the wife's side, and that comes into
okay.
all,
And that's
another
where we get
thing.
Bartram Ave.
Bartram Avenue, which is like in Philadelphia, where you have the Bartram Arboretums and so forth.
Oh,
so it's
okay.
all part of that family.
Really?
Because Thomas Richards was actually lived in Philadelphia,
Okay.
and he commuted here,
Okay.
and that was another reason for wanting the trains. And in fact, there's no true story of how that section got to be named ATCO.
Mm-hmm.
Some think it was the Atlantic Train Company.
Mm-hmm.
There was some stories that circulated. Well, the Native Americans, that word meant land of many deer. So I never get caught up in that. It's
Right.
whatever. He was the guy who laid out, and that's the name they had put to it.
Okay.
In 1860s, he hired someone to do a full layout of the township, and what he wanted to do, in many areas we had small lots.
Okay.
Because he wanted this to be, quote, a health resort in the Pines,
Okay.
and that's how he advertised it in Philadelphia.
Interesting.
As the health resort. And then he did some other very brilliant things. First of all, he wanted to be families coming here, so he actually provided the land for the churches.
Okay.
So every church, even to this day, any church here in the ATCO section was built on lands from a deed by Thomas Richards.
Really?
And in fact, there's a restriction so that it can't be anything else. And the best example is like the Christ the Redeemer Parish today, where they used to be near the new firehouse. That land, even to get it to be used, they didn't sell it, but to get it to be used as part of the landmass for the fire company, they had to go through tracking down any known survivors of the family,
Really?
just to get the right to quote use it a little different. Nothing's built on it, but
Right.
just so that it ended up being part of the open space by the fire company.
Oh, okay. So
But like the Presbyterian Church was built on a land granted by Thomas Richards and some of the others. But that was part of his thing to bring people into
do you
town.
know if there are descendants still around?
There are some. Who they are? Actually, Bastow keeps a
record.
record of it because that was Samuel Richards, the other brother.
Oh, okay.
So they kept a record of the descendants and those family. I don't know how many are still left,
Right.
but there's a good cross section.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
And then part of the other thing, as I said, he wanted to make this a family community. He sold it as a health resort, and then he did a lot of things to bring business in. In many cases, he would give the land to a business if they came and established here in town.
Okay.
And in the beginning, we became like the big flower capital. Flowers was a big thing grown and shipped out of Waterford Township for many years. Later, it was eggs, chicken farms. In fact, some of our earlier Jewish settlers, in fact, I wrote an article for the Camden County Heritage magazine talking about those years when the Jewish people who were trying to get out of Europe, and there was a group formed that helped them, quote, get a farm. It was a farm to go, they called it. And they gave you a certain amount to buy a farm, to pay for the chickens, to put up the chicken coops, and then they used to send you to the egg auction or the egg place in Vineland, so you would have a place to sell your eggs, you know, or to give it to them, and they took care of distributing it.
Wow.
And that's how some of our earlier farmers got here, under that way. And I told the story of a guy named Leon and his wife Sylvia, who started with a farm, and they sold their eggs and so forth. And then as time went on, they raised enough that they converted their buildings into a rehabilitation center. and that became the L&S Rest Home. That was the Pliners.
Ah.
Who now today it's called the Onyx or something else like that, or
Right.
Jackson Manor. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
but all
Right.
of that was one of their original farms, one
Right.
of those original
Wow.
egg farms.
Wow.
And that's just so exciting to see the things that
Right.
happen in our
And
community.
now usually people who are egg farmers, they do it on the side.
Oh yeah, right.
Like mother
It's a hobby.
cluckers.
Yeah.
Mother cluckers.
Right.
That's one. That's funny pun, but yeah. And yeah, they're out there. And there's a few of people in Waterford Township selling eggs.
And one of the things, the early growth of the township is, as I spoke about how we went from the Delaware toward the Atlantic Ocean, most of the growth initially was around the waterways.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Naturally.
say Pennsauken Creek, what we know today is Pennsauken Creek and
Mhm.
Cooper River, and then along the Mullica and so forth. And it took a while before they moved inland. And then that inland movement was actually following the Native Americans.
Okay.
And they were the first, I'll call them shoobies going to the shore, because they actually had the trails so that they would be in this general area, say during the winter, and when the weather got nice, they went off and they went to the seashore.
Oh, okay.
And then that's how
just
these
like
trails
modern day.
came along.
Okay.
The so-called railroad paths and all that were basically based upon the original Native American trails.
Wow.
And that was how you moved around the state. The first stagecoach routes, all of those things were really laid out by our original founders, the Native Americans.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you talk the story, people talk about Henry Hudson, who founded the North River and the South River. The North River became known as Hudson River. The South River was the Delaware River.
Wow. Okay.
Now, the amazing thing, though, was when he first discovered the South River, he was in the area in the Delaware Bay where there's a lot of sandbars. So he decided the river must not be navigable. So he never went up the river. Although he claimed it, he never went up the Delaware.
Right.
It wasn't until a guy named May came and he started trading with the Native Americans, usually the Delawareans, and they showed him how to navigate the river. So he actually was the first to go up the river.
Yeah.
You know him, you know May's Landing and all that.
Oh,
But the funny
okay.
thing about it, he spelled his name M-E-Y, and somehow or another it got spelled M-A-Y.
Right.
So Cape May and May's Landing, all these other things
They're
in honor
named
of
after
May.
him. See, I never knew.
And he
that.
doesn't know it though,
Right.
because he
doesn't
doesn't
know.
spell
They're
his
spelling it
way.
wrong.
So you always love that. So
That's
you know,
great. That's good. That is.
that'd be
great.
my luck. They named someone after me, and I'll probably be named wrong. So I was trying to see. I think that was some of the real key points. As I said,
Yeah.
navigation by the river, the building atco into a city in the pines. That required the growth of a railway system and its service to atco. And that's how this whole rail system came. The Richards family, as I said, got really involved in getting the rail lines here. That's why you have the Raritan lines, and we have, quote, a Raritan Avenue. And
Right.
there was a number of rail systems that merged here or came here, and then eventually went on to the shore. And the Richards were behind that growth and development,
Got it.
helping to spur it down.
Right.
And that's why we think it's so important to rebuild a rail station, because that part of our history needs to be told
Right.
and remembered.
So now we're gonna take another break, and then do we have enough for one more segment?
Sure,
or-
we'll just do a general review.
We'll do a
some things
general
and talk
review.
about it.
So we will be back in a little bit for our fourth and final on this series, section on this series. So we're hoping you enjoy it, and we hope you're learning something. We're social distancing. There is a pandemic going on. It's not, we're not so far apart because we don't like each other. It's because, we're doing the right thing. So we thank you for watching. This has been Kurt Mulway of the ACO Acorn. Tony Clark, former mayor who held the position 5 times over 3 decades, different times during that, and was also a councilman and served with the governor's body and did a lot. Now he's with the Historic Society. So I want to thank you, and we will see you later in our next segment. Thank you very much.